The story of contemporary New Zealand music is informed by many creative characters, but perhaps none more so than Phil Judd, fine artist, graphic designer, illustrator, musician and composer. In this frank and revealing four-part interview series, we examine the man behind the myth and discover a driven creative artist, an all-round conundrum who is reflecting intently on the ups and downs of his life. In part one, we explore his childhood and his brief but influential tenure as the leader of groundbreaking New Zealand band Split Enz and his time with the Swingers. The songs in order of appearance in part one are Split Enz and the sweet-talking spoon song from the album The Beginning of the Ends. Time for a Change from Split Enz's debut album Mental Notes, and the Swingers track Certain Sounds from the compilation album AK-79. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Judd.
To my friends, telling them all about Split Enz, watching flowers hit the floor. Why can't they see it so much more? For one's ready of another, it's all the same to me, brother. Never know these days, mother, I might still be your lover. Nothing else is so obscene as coffee beans and smoke machines. Take your daughter for a ride, let her know you're on her side. Guess there's no words can beat it. Sunday treat and rigor mortis meat. We should never found your feet sniffing toe jams really neat. Writing letters to my friends, telling them all about Split Enz.
What year were you born and where were you born?
1953 in Hastings.
And you went to school in Hastings and then you went to university in Auckland?
Yeah. Very much a mid-60s history, really, you know. Doing barracks at school, if you know what that is, and even though it was a state school, Hastings Boys High, in those days, a lot of state schools were still very much, most of the masters, well, it was all male masters, and it was all very disciplined, to say the least, still caning and all that, and mostly middle-aged and older ex-servicemen at the school, so it was very, very strict kind of upbringing still. The last dregs of Victoriana, really, I think of it as.
I don't know what barracks is. Could you tell us about that?
Well, it was military training, basically. We were the cannon fodder for the Vietnam War. We were the last bunch. I missed out by 1 year of conscription. So I was a little 13-year-old, trucked off to high school, and suddenly, you know, you're being taught how to strip a 303 and a Bren gun blindfolded and, you know, marching, doing long route marches that just about killed me, and, you know, in khakis, dressed up to the, you know, the whole bit. And that was quite regular. That was, I spoke to my brother about it recently. It was, you know, 2 or 3 days every 2 or 3 weeks, solid barracks. So it was serious stuff, and I think sometimes that's forgotten, us generation, or my generation of males that are now in our early 60s, or roughly, kind of a lot of us were brought up very old school, you know, and we've been through all the changes. It's been a wonderful time, but Jesus, you know, what we've seen.
So how did you cope with that? You obviously were an artistic temperament. How did you cope with the military training and the harsh discipline?
Well, see, again, like my father was ex-World War II. He did the full 5 years. He was a major, and he had a military bearing. and discipline, all that stuff. Checked that my shoes were polished and socks were pulled up before I went to school every day. So it was part of, for a lot of us, it was part of, we had ex-servicemen fathers, and they were, just as the non-fiction and fiction describe, pretty staunch, hardy chaps who grunted a lot and were angry a lot, and very different from men today, basically.
Was your childhood happy?
A mixed bag, like all of us, I'd say, a mixed bag. I love my father to bits. He passed just a couple of years ago at 92, and he was a typical of that generation also, that he mellowed and became a sweet man in his last 30 or so years. But before that, he was kind of just grumpy and angry, and probably didn't ever understand why, because there was no facility for attending to men's emotional needs at those times. So, yeah. So, childhood, fine, really. Couldn't wish for more. Look, in hindsight, this is hindsight, of course. But, yeah, no complaints.
I belong to that very, very tail end of boys that before they outlawed caning at school. I belong to that tail end, and I got caned once for absolutely nothing. I had to pull down my pants, bare my buttocks, and get 6 of the best. And I was so outraged by it that it turned me into an absolute rebel.
Well, that is a classic scenario, isn't it? It's exactly the same for me, for next to no reason, and it turns you against the violence, just makes you so angry, and without real good rational cause for it. That's what turned a lot of us into not rebels as such, but it made us stop and think, I think, is the point.
So how did your father feel about you, about your artistic pretensions?
To linger on my father for a little bit, he was a classic chap that never would have gone to uni, but he had the intelligence to go to uni, and the war came along and swept him off his feet at 19, and he came back to New Zealand at 25, 26, and had to start a new life, not knowing really where to start. And he grabbed the first job he could, which was a travelling salesman, and through that, within a couple of years, he had bought a little grocery shop in Hastings. Yeah, well, what I was thinking around to is he being an observant little chap, I remember seeing, have to this day, a couple of items of... you may remember on the back of Post magazines and picture magazines that were pics that was popular back in the 60s, be a commercial artist, whatever. Well, he did one of those courses, and he did the drawings, and his drawings were much like I ended up doing, like very detailed, super realist, basically. And he definitely had the ability, and, he would sit on the end of my bed when I was a toddler, singing George Formby songs on ukulele. He could sing and he could play a bit, and but with no aspirations, if you know what I mean. So he just had natural talents, and I guess that's where I kind of grabbed a bit of it from. So yeah, in terms of me going to art school, I think I was lucky enough to have a father that pushed me to carry out what he never could, basically. So I ended up going to art school and dropping out within a year and a half because I hated it.
What did you hate about it?
There I was, not following with a very good, always got top marks and crap without boasting in art history and whatever. Knew more than the bloody art teacher, Gomch and whatever, the history of art, knew everything, know-it-all prick. I got to art school and it was the same old stuff, lectures, more lectures. I just wanted to paint. I just wanted to, express myself, and all the painting teachers were abstract painters, and of course I was a realist, and I was like my whole bloody life. I was out of my time. I just didn't fit in, and but they gave me just pass marks at the end of the first year, and people knew that I was good at what I did, technically, and blah, blah, blah. These abstract guys just did everything they could to get me to change my ways and to follow the trend, which is something Mr Judd is not going to do. So, fortuitously, I met, during the end of that first summer, was when I got to know Tim a bit, and we started hanging out at the beginning of the second year at art school, and about June of that year, my second year at art school, when I was just hating it, I just up and quit, and Tim did soon afterwards. Yeah, so that's basically it. It was just because I was wasting my time there. I had already started doing paintings and was taking them from home to at one of the top galleries, commercial galleries in Auckland at the time, and selling stuff. So it was like, to me, it was like, I don't need to be here because I know how to paint and I know what's going on. It was just a big waste of time. And, I'm not a red tape type. I'm not one to have ever enjoyed the bureaucracy of uni and all the rest of it. So I was out of there. And, we started doing factory jobs, working at Hurd's Lolly Factory and the post office and God knows what, and we didn't give a shit. We didn't complain. We just got on with it, made money to pay the rent and get on with getting our musical shit together, basically.
So when did you first pick up the guitar?
Well, around that time, around the end of the first year. This is my historical memory is a bit vaguer than Tim's, for instance. I just bought a crap Yamaha acoustic, and because I'd been hanging around Tim a bit, and I was just like a little bit of a fan who sat in on the drums a bit and played drums a bit, just like every kid who can't play anything else does. He was with Chan and Rob Gillies, and they had their little covers band doing Leon Russell and Elton John stuff. They weren't doing any originals, had no aspirations whatsoever. And then I get myself a guitar and start fiddling around with tunings, like learning the basic stuff, and without learning covers, just I don't know how, but magically I kind of found my thing, and I had a good sense of rhythm more than anything else. Tim would sort of come up and say, "Oh, what's that you're playing?" I say, "I don't know," some chord combo, and Tim would start singing along, and that's how it all kicked off, pretty much. And I'd start singing something to something I was writing, and of course I couldn't sing for shit then. It's only 3 years of being a try-hard that I still try hard, and at that department. And Tim, would embellish melodies and whatever, and would throw in a lyric here and there, and I was the early days I was the sort of main lyricist, but Tim definitely was, throwing in lines and suggestions and whatnot. And that's how we got our first, half dozen tunes together, basically. All very impromptu and inspired, and yeah.
It's funny you say that you weren't much of a vocalist back then. My wife and I were listening to tracks off your new album, Play It Strange, on the weekend, and she was just remarking on what a fantastic vocalist you are, and what an amazing vocal style you do have, and you do have an incredibly unique vocal style.
Well, thanks for that, but I don't know. I've just stuck to my guns. It was like when to just bounce around in history a bit. When I did eventually quit the ends and decided to form a three-piece, keep it simple and stupid sort of approach. I just decided, I don't need a singer, I'll just do my best. It was very much, I still had that attitude even then, a few years on. I just sort of thought, because as I say, I'd grown up with my father's taste, my parents' taste, which were very sort of old school, George Formby and a lot of the swing bands and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of them aren't technically, Irish balladeers. They're men with character voices, and I've always sort of tried to stick to my guns with, I've got my limitations, and I love limitations. Can't beat them. I do the best I can. That's all I can say. Well, I know I'm not a sort of a quote sort of natural tenor type vocalist singer with a beautiful voice, but that's what I've been given, so I just go with it.
Yeah, you've summed it up very well. I mean, you do have a character voice. I think it's the second track on the album, Play It Strange. It sounds like it's been recorded in the 1930s, you know, sung through that kind of microphone and the style it was done then, and you sound very much like a performer from that time.
In the verses, yeah, in particular, yeah. That's just through a little bit of just amp distortion, actually, not a phone sort of. There are, you know, various digital plugins and whatnot these days to get that effect, but and I have used that on Novelty Act on a couple of tracks, but I just didn't want to be that kind of over the top with it, just subtle. And yeah, that still sneaks through in my writing. I don't know why or how, because I've never sat down and learnt any George Formby songs or any vaudeville type tunes. You know, I've never. I'm not that kind of musician. I've never learned a cover in my life except Old Lang Syne, because we used to have to play it at swingers gigs and stuff. So, you know, it just all comes out through a natural means, really.
Returning back to the early days of Split Ends, one of my favourite tracks, which is pre-Mental Notes, is a track called, I can't remember the title, it's Writing Letters to My Friends, Telling Them All About Split Ends.
Oh, really? That's probably the first song we ever finished. As far as my memory goes, it's the first song that we ever finished, and we're chuffed with it. But I found in hindsight, I don't listen to the old stuff very much. Maybe once every 10, 15 years I'll have a few drinks and crank it up, put Mental Notes on and listen to the old singles. Sweet Talking Spoon Song is my favourite of all the end stuff I've done, strangely enough. I was asked this a while back, and Sweet Talking Spoon Song kind of sums up the best of where I felt I was at the time.
How's your day been, my love? How's your day been? Today, how's your day been? Darling, hope you've been good. Well, I've been away. I've been walking down a lonely street. You'd be amazed at the people I meet, saying hello to people all day. Wonder why they turn away. You've been my baby, you make my life worthwhile. You've been my sweetheart, you make my life worthwhile. Sweeping the streets, dawn till dusk, every day. I think of you on my wall. How's your day been, my love? How's your day been? Today, how's your day been? Darling, hope you've been good. Well, I've been away. When I go to bed at night, I see your face by pale moonlight, stuck on me wall, it's a crying shame. I wish like hell I knew your name. You've been my baby, you make my life worthwhile. You've been my sweetheart, you make my life worthwhile. Cleaning all day, broom in hand, it's okay.
Well, speaking as a fanboy, Mental Notes, even now, and the songs that predate it, even now I listen to them and I'm astonished by the musical complexity of them, the arrangements. Nothing I've found from that era compares. Completely unique.
Well, I must admit, I have to be honest and say that I still cringe. I do a lot of cringing when I do listen, even if I've had a few drinks. I go, ooh, you know, particularly about my vocal stuff. That's the one department I just was lost, basically. I really was inspired and wanted to do it, but I didn't quite know, you know, there was shades of Peter Gabriel and the chap from Family and whatnot, little influences that I can hear clear as day now. But the music, at rehearsals or practices, putting a track together from, you know, what coming along with my acoustic or my and Tim's acoustic version of those songs, all happened spontaneously as well. No, it wasn't like a contrived sort of prog rock band, you know, like sitting around going, how clever can we be? It just all happened very naturally, and I think that still sort of comes across a bit. I have to be honest again and say I disagree with you. There's lots of prog rock bands that are much more interesting to listen to in my book, but that's just me.
How did you feel about re-recording Mental Notes as Second Thoughts?
Well, for me it was the beginning of the end very quickly, because as soon as we came to Australia, even though Gudinski at Mushroom Records, who, you know, like I thank to this day that he gave us a break, there was this pressure to sort of, you know, to be commercial. The first couple of years in New Zealand, we just did our thing, you know, the bucketheads and shows and touring and playing at unis and stuff, and a lot of people liked us and we went down well. But as chalk and cheese as Australia and New Zealand are at times, the taste and the culture were quite different. We came to Aussie and very quickly realised that this is a lot more influenced by the States and the need for things to sell, and all that stuff started occurring. It hadn't really dawned on us. We were still young and naive. We were still only 21, 22, you know. So, and then, of course, we were lucky enough via Mushroom and Gudinski to do a lot of supports, you know, Lou Reed, Leo Sayer, Santana, and, of course, Roxy Music, Frank Zappa. I could go on. It's just amazing now when I think back on it. But we supported these people around the country, and fortuitously, Phil Manzanera from Roxy Music, he was still the youngest chap, still in his 20s when I think about it now. He said, gee, I can do something with this bunch. I like where you're at. And we managed to get to the UK, which was our ultimate dream, and it all seemed to happen so quickly. We'd only been in Oz a year. Both Tim and I would agree we were just so thankful to be taken away from Australia, really, because I don't think we were enjoying it that much. But the deal was, we were pretty much told, you know, like Manzanera, he was the producer, and he chose what material, and like, okay, re-record this, I can do a better job with this, and whatnot. And for me, of course, I had been, as I always have done, I just keep writing and writing and writing and writing. A lot of material I had sitting in the wings, so to speak, just didn't ever see the light of day, didn't even play it to Tim or the others, you know. So I'm kind of sad about that. In retrospect, that a great opportunity was lost, you know. Of course, not a lot, but quite a few of those songs that I had written then were later used by the Swingers, and I still use bits and pieces to this day when they pop into my head. So it was great to be working in a good studio with a really brilliant engineer and with Phil. It was just like a big step forward. You know, the product was kind of, some people like it more, some people don't. I don't know. It just didn't seem appropriate to the time to me. And for me, as the history shows, it was kind of the beginning of the end. Tim was starting to write material on his own in the house we stayed in, and we no longer sat around as a couple of mates, you know, even if it was just for him to chip in a bit here or there, or actually he'd started to come with some bits, and we just didn't click like we used to. And for me, that was the essence of it. Was the, you know, I mean, to be very honest, he was the best friend I've kind of ever had. It started to fall apart at that time. Touring constantly, and unlike the myth might sort of want to make, that Judd would be the type to hide in his hotel room and nobody would see me and all this stuff. Well, that's just not true. I was very sociable and used to go out and have fun with Mike Chan and Eddie and whatnot. We used to go bowling and do all sorts of things, but Tim was the one that locked himself in his room and we never saw. And I'll just say it one last time, that was the beginning of the end for me.
You ended up leaving Split Enz, and then you rejoined briefly, and you left during an American tour. You found your way back to New Zealand, and you got involved with the punk scene.
Well, not intentionally. Went back to Auckland. Of course, I must say, because again, I'm a bit tired of the myths that have sort of dragged on through the years about me, kind of like having to punch up with Tim and, it was all about Tim and me. Well, it wasn't. It was about that I had a wife and a toddler, and we had no money, and the band wouldn't give me any more money than the rest of them. It was all equal handout, and of course, with a wife and a baby to support, I just couldn't do it. I had no sort of financial support from my parents, unlike the others. And in the end, it just got to me when we were doing an extensive tour, the last tour I did of parts of America and Australasia, to promote Second Thoughts after it was released. And, I was away for 3 months, and I would just have my wife on the phone in tears saying, we're eating porridge and baked beans, and they literally were. And I just couldn't stand it, and that's why I snapped. Tim just provoked me one night, and I just, lashed out. It was stupid and childish and all the rest of it, and I regret it, but it happened. And it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything really to do with Tim. It was because the frustration within me had built up to such a point that I just had to respond, and that's what happened. So yeah, I basically returned to New Zealand because my wife sort of gave me an ultimatum. Either you get a job and look after us and do your bloke thing, or we're out of here.
As though you were a blind man who's crying about all the virgins that are dying in your habitual dreams. Seems you need more sleep, but like a parrot in a flaming tree, I know it's pretty hard to see. Wonder if it's time for a change, but still you try like a fat boy, dancing Gershwin's blues. But you'd rather sit at home and watch the news. And I'm beginning to wonder if it's time for a change. I'm beginning to wonder if it's time for a change.
So I did. I returned to New Zealand and went down to the Dole office and got lucky with the lady that was there, and she got me a job as assistant photographer at the Auckland City Art Gallery because of, I'd done photography since I was 14 at home. I had my own darkroom and stuff, so I was pretty au fait with photography and whatnot. And I had a good little job, and I bumped into Buster Stiggs, also known as Mark Huff, his real name, and who I'd gone to high school with, although he was a couple of years younger, in Auckland one day, and he said, come down and hear us, blah, blah, blah. It was a place called Zwane's, I think, and I went out, started going out, just listening to bands, just listening to what was going on in the Auckland scene. It's not sort of normally something I would do, but I did, and I had no intention of starting another band. I was going to paint, do my day job, look after my family, and start painting again, which is what I was doing. For a couple of months, that was fine, and then I got the bug. Just hearing the sort of pseudo-punk scene. I didn't particularly like the music. In fact, I was startled that I'd come back to sort of this kind of, I hate to say it, second-rate pseudo-punk scene after having seen the real thing, fortuitously again in the UK in 76. We had Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious at one of our gigs, They're incredible. Checking us out. Oh, no, they're bloody arty-farty types, fuck them. And, they wanted to see who was a threat and whatnot, and McLaren was, so on the case. And then going back to New Zealand, and I even said to Buster, I said, "Dude, what are you doing? Wearing Nazi outfits and the sort of working class ethic that you're pretending to be when you're just nice little New Zealand middle class boys. It just seemed pretentious and wrong to me. I hate to say it, I really do. The intentions were kind of good. Follow the fashion, do what's happening at the time. When you're young and in a band, it's what people tend to do. But I didn't get it at all. But, some of the influences, the grooves, the dynamic of the music was something I had been hanging out to do because, as you know, Sprinensis music was very stilted. It might be good in parts or the early ends, but it was very stilted. There was no songs that were kind of ever driven by, electric guitar or a solid groove. So for me to suddenly be in I spotted Bones, and he was by far the best bass player in town, and Buster was, a good, unique, not technically brilliant, but original. And I've always had a thing for... That's the only thing in life that pricks up my ears is when something's original and unique, something that gives you that little tingle because it is different. Well, when we got together and just started jamming in a rehearsal room, it was just magic. And the early swingers stuff, none of which is recorded, was pretty raw, and live we were very popular for a while. But again, the same thing happened, within a year or so. We were kind of gigging up and down, managing ourselves, sort of making a living. Like we all quit our jobs, and we were actually making a living, believe it or not, from being musos. And then Gadinsky caught up with what I was doing on a trip to New Zealand. He said, Jesus, this isn't bad. Come to Oz and we'll get you a couple of supports and see how it goes. So it was a repeat performance of what happened with me in the ends, basically. And the same thing, but even more so, the music had become even more kind of, the commercial factor had struck me, and the pressure put on us by Gadinsky to be commercial. Well, again, I imploded very quickly. Within 2 years, we'd broken up, and, after the success of Counting the Beat and, trying to lock me in a room to write a sort of a song in the same vein just wasn't going to happen. Yeah, so I'll stop there for a bit.